Well, we're glad you're here, and mothers, we are glad you've been here, and glad that you have begun many of the tasks that you have as a mother, but remember that you're not done yet. Um, I was talking with someone one time, and they were concerned about their child that was about to graduate from high school. And I said, well, you can relax because studies show that by the time your child graduates from high school, you've taught them 93% of everything you will ever teach them. So you're almost done. Now, that doesn't always inspire us because sometimes we think, well, then I didn't teach them enough. I feel like I've got a lot more to say. Well, that may be true, but you taught them a language, you taught them balance, you taught them the ability to walk, you taught them how to manage their emotions. That's something I'd like to rework with my kids a little bit. How to deal with anger, deal with frustration. We learn a whole host of things beyond simple facts that parents teach to children, and mothers, a lot of it because of the intimacy of the relationship. But how do you go about teaching when your conversations get really, really limited? I can remember coming home from my time in the office or time out, and this was when our kids were little, and Janet being frustrated because she'd been with the kids all day long, and I don't know, I've never read a study on it. I wonder, how many questions do you suppose a 3-year-old asks in one day? Would 5,000 be enough? I really doubt that it is. Probably a lot more than that. Everything from, why is the ground green to why is the sky blue to why can't I eat that? And Janet had, I think she was probably on question 2,994, and she said, you need to do something with the boys. And so I told them, boys, go to bed, because, that's what I did best. Her moment by moment, task by task, her keeping them alive, that they didn't run into the street, they didn't fall off of the roof, they didn't, that was important achievements. And all of you have your own stories in regard to that. I did a funeral for a lady the other day, and Kim, and she was the oldest of 3 siblings. And her little brother told me this story. Now, this lady was 77. Her little brother's in his mid-70s. But he said, Judy never really wanted siblings. He said, in fact, she traded me and Janet for 2 rabbits. And my mom had to go nullify the swap because she had traded it to somebody. Well, little kids do lots of things that keep mothers pretty busy. So for all of the inane things, for all of the important things, but for all of the just day after day, decision after decision, seemingly unimportant, but really vital things that you've done, thank you. And we are in your debt. But my lesson has nothing to do with mothers today. But it has everything to do with mothers today. Because it's about prayer. And many, many years ago, I read a book by Eugene Peterson, who said that the most important thing that a minister can do for a church is pray. And as he went on to talk about it, he said, if you spend more time studying or visiting or any other task that you define as your job than you do praying, you may well have your priorities out of order. Now, that kind of set me back because I thought, well, I don't know that I pray that much. And so it's caused me to look at prayers in a new way. And as I read my Bible, and my task in speaking to you on Sundays is this: I'm trying to disciple you. I'm trying to move your discipleship a little deeper into God so that you follow him better. And I'm trying to talk about some of the things that have been helpful to me to become better, and then you can share some things that are helpful to you because you've done some things I haven't done. But we're trying to figure out how to do a better job at being like Jesus. And so I've been reading Colossians the last few months. And I read faster than that. All right, it's only 4 chapters, but I've read it over and over and over again. And I've read it quickly, and then I've read it slowly, and then I've read it verse by verse or section by section. And one of the questions that I have for myself as I read these things from God is, what do you expect me to get from this? What do you get from a letter that was written to somebody else who lived at a different time, who had different concerns? When Paul wrote to Colossae, nobody was worried about the Ukraine because it wasn't a country. So they're thinking about things different than us. So what are we supposed to get from a book or a letter written to somebody else when we're just reading it and looking at it? Well, one of the things that I want to get from reading my Bible is I want to understand what is important to God. Okay? If God, by inspiration, is the ultimate author of our Bibles, then I want to be able to ask the question of him as I'm reading it, what do you expect me to get from this? What's the benefit? What's the value in my life? Because all of us have read our Bibles at times just because we heard it was supposed to be good for us and really didn't have an agenda, and maybe we're just trying to get through the page. And when I first became a Christian, I didn't know anything about the Bible, and I was reading it, and there wasn't very much on the page that made any sense to me at all. And so I would read because it was an obligation, because those who were discipling me said you need to read your Bible, but I would read and not really understand what I was reading or why I was reading it. So I want to know what God intends for me to gain from reading. And as I was reading Colossians this time, I noticed one of Paul's prayers. You know, prayer is an important part in my life, and reading the prayers of others has become an important hobby and discipline for me. And I read prayers from Christians who lived in the 400s, trying to figure out what are they concerned about. And I've read prayers of people who live today, wondering what are they concerned about. So let's look at Paul's prayer, and it's just verses 9 through 12 of Colossians 1. So it's not real long, but there's some really interesting things and things that you may want to start incorporating in your own life as you pray for yourself and pray for others. Paul's been talking about the love that the church at Colossae has for them and their ministry and their effort to do the right thing. That's what comes into this before he begins his prayer. And he says, for this reason, because you're concerned about the rest of the world, for this reason, we have not stopped praying for you since the day that we heard about you. A little while ago, Tom prayed for a family who lost the husband father in a terrible accident. And Chris suggested that they would appreciate our prayers. Why? Why would they be concerned whether we were praying for them? Well, evidently, Tom and Chris, and I would assume others of us, believe that when you pray, it does something. You get a different result than you would have received had you not prayed. And here he says, here's the first thing that we ask God for you. We ask God to fill you with the knowledge of His will through every kind of spiritual wisdom and insight. Now, what that suggests to us is that we're going to understand, based on what you pray, I'm going to receive a different understanding than I would have had about who God is than I would have had you not prayed. Because I receive a knowledge of God's will coming from every kind of spiritual wisdom and insight. So I receive that from a source that I would not have received it had you not been praying for me. Now, I think that's important because sometimes parents think, well, how do I keep influencing my kids? I mean, I quit giving them money, so now I don't have any influence anymore. Or I quit giving them a place to live or fuel for their tank, So now I no longer have influence. Well, that's not true. You can have influence based on your prayer. And you can impact their understanding of who God is based on your prayer, as God, through that, provides a spiritual wisdom and insight. I don't know if you've ever thought that your prayer could accomplish that or not, but Paul believed his could, and so I assume that mine can, so that you'll see things differently. Now, have you ever wanted your kids to see the world a little different than they see it? Yesterday, 4 or 5 of you, along with Janet and I, watched a horse race. Now, not everybody likes to watch horse races, and that's okay. That's your loss. I love to watch horse races. And as I've told you in the past, I've watched every Triple Crown race since 1971. So I've seen them all, and I love to watch them. And I am so good at it that I knew that this horse that finished first should not have been in that race, shouldn't have even stepped on the track with those other horses. And he won. I have no idea how he did that. But Janet and I were sitting and we were talking about it. And, you know, Janet's watched horse races over my shoulder for years. I mean, we've been married since 73. So she's seen a few of them. But usually she's doing something else while I'm watching the horse race. But yesterday, 2 days ago, Janet says, Carl, you realize they're drawing pole positions for the horse race today. Have you started picking your horse? Well, I can't really pick my horse until I know what position he's running in. And so I thought, Janet hasn't always done this. She hasn't always worried 3 days ahead of time, or 2 days ahead of time, where a particular horse will be on the racetrack as it begins. So she's changed. My influence, she's changed. Now, not everybody's concerned about those things. And Janet has at times thought I'm a little too concerned about those things, and that's all well and good. And I've only picked the top 3 horses one time in the last 50 years, and I didn't get them in the right order then. So I'm not very good at this. But yesterday, none of my 3 picks finished in the top 4. So that shows you I'm really not good at this. But those are things that we have an interest in. Well, maybe we should change the interest. The other night, we went to see Lion King. Now, Mara sat next to me telling me the story because I've never seen it. I don't know what it's about. And so we're going along in this play and they're singing and people are, when you sing songs, and you sing songs with an African dialect, you don't always understand everything they're saying. And so this lady came out and she's singing and Mara said, she means this. Let's say, well, that's good. Now, we took them to a big musical production for a reason. Their parents are hoping to shape them, give them a little bit of culture. They want them to see things that are big and grand and beautiful. They want them to have a different experience. Well, that's good. That's an effort to shape them. Paul's saying, if you pray for your kids, you can shape them. You can influence, not by talking to them, but you can influence their knowledge of God. So you've given them so much information as a foundation as they were growing up about God, but you continue to have an influence in that if you pray according to Paul. Now, there's other things. He says, we also pray that you will live the kind of lives that prove that you belong to God, to the Lord. So I can pray trying to influence not just the knowledge and the understanding of my children, but I can pray trying to improve the performance of my children. I can pray that they will live a life that indicates they belong to God. Now, that's an important thing to do. As they know about what you're praying for regarding them, that shapes them. So Paul's telling these people what his prayer is for them, but he believes that his prayer has an impact. And I'm suggesting to you that your prayer about your kids, mothers today because it's Mother's Day, but the reality is it's all of us, that our prayer about our children and our grandchildren, by our disciples, by the people that we love, by our parents, by whoever, that those prayers have power. We believe as people of faith that when we approach God with information, that it can change what takes place from what would have happened had we not prayed. If you don't believe that it can make a change, why pray? So we believe that we can alter the progress of people by our efforts to pray. It's why Paul instructs them to pray for the leaders of their country. It's why he tells them to pray for the leaders of their church. It's why he instructs them to pray for their children or for their spouse, because he believes that if you take these things before God, it changes the outcome. And so recognize that this alters things. Not only will you live a life that's in harmony with your relationship with God, but he believes that you can also pray so that you will desire, so that the one you are praying for will desire to please God in every way. So you can pray changing not only the way that someone thinks, you can pray and change the way they act, but you can pray and change the way that to change their very desires, to alter and shape their desires. Now, as I say, you can pray and do these things. Understand that I don't believe that you're going to take an unbeliever and that they will become a believer because you pray. I don't think it happens even when they don't want it to take place. I'm not saying that. But I think that it does impact their opportunities for faith. It impacts the way that they are influenced in their thinking and the way they are influenced in their behavior, so that you will want to please Him in every way, and that your production changes, so that you will grow in producing every kind of good work by this knowledge about God. If you know that God is involved in your life, that He is integral to your life, it alters the way that you function. Jerry says he knows the song. Some of the others have said you know it. When Janet was growing up, there was a song that a song leader in her church sang called "There's an All-Seeing Eye Watching You." Now, I don't know the song. I've never read it, I don't think. But she said she thought that meant that God was waiting for you to slip up. And then as soon as you slipped up, He's going to smash you. That's not what the song meant. The song meant everywhere you go and everything you do, God is always aware of that. And so He stands ready to help, to assist, to empower, to strengthen, that there's an all-seeing eye that watches you. Well, if I have a knowledge that God is in my life, maybe my performance changes. I was watching some television show the other day, and in this show, these two characters were talking to each other about a third person. And as the one character is talking, the other character's attitude changes and their responses change. And the first character looked at them and said, "He's behind me, isn't he?" And they said, "Yeah, he is." Well, that character is saying, if I'd known he was there, I'd have done a little different. Well, if we have an awareness of the presence of God, maybe we would do a little different. Maybe we would try to perform on a higher scale than we are. Parents do all kinds of things. Jerry's told me the story of his grandmother. Was this a clothier? His grandmother. She'd let him go out and light the trash. And he'd be there and he'd strike the match and the fires would get to going and really raging. And she'd say, "Boy, if you look at how hot that is, can you imagine how hot hell is?" Well, now that may cause you to think differently about the world, okay? But what she was doing, to her credit, what she was doing is saying, in this everyday, ordinary behavior, recognize that there are spiritual things that are also as real as this. And because those things are as real, you need to live with that awareness. So that's not a mother praying, that's a grandmother performing. And those are good things. The next one. He says, we also, since we first heard about you, have been asking God to strengthen you by His glorious might with all of the power that you need to rise up and bop them in the nose. Not what he says. He says we want him to strengthen you by his glorious might with the power that you need to patiently endure everything with joy. Is there anybody in here that endures with joy? If there is, we want to honor you today because we recognize that sounds like a really tough thing. And Paul's suggesting with a supernatural power from God that God provides, you'll be able to doing it with joy is one thing. I can't even do it patiently. Okay, much less patiently endure and then be joyful in the process. But he's saying that when he prays, he can give you that kind of power. Now, clearly, my forebears didn't do this very well. And it looks like some of you are failing me in that regard too, because I'm not getting this kind of strength. But I can make fun of that all I want to, but recognize that it is a truth that God put forth in his text for us to benefit from. You can be taught by prayer to produce a gratitude even in the presence of difficulty. And gratitude in the presence of difficult is a really, really rare commodity. But it happens. And we want to put that in. So, that's his prayer. And he concludes it with this statement. And if I pray to you, or if I pray for you to God, the result will be that you will also begin to communicate with God with thanksgiving because God has made you able to share your relationship, his light, which is what God's people inherit. God, your prayers in the lives of your kids and the lives of your grandkids and the lives of your spouse and the lives of your parents and of your siblings, they can produce all of these things according to Paul. But I would encourage you when you say, I don't even know how to pray, to go back and reflect on a prayer like this and begin to talk to God with your specific goals for your kids in mind in all of these categories. And ask God as Cade and his fiancee get ready to begin life together, that these things take place in their world. And Scripture indicates that if you do that, it will happen in a way that it would not have happened if you had not done it. So I encourage you to pray, and I encourage you to pray for specifics. And pray with the awareness that God can function in people in ways that you never dreamed, and that he has made promises to do that in the text in ways that you've probably not thought about before. If we can help you be more like Jesus today, we want to do that. And all you need to do is let us know how we could be helpful as together we stand and sing.